So kind of like to make this look like golden and make this look really good, I'm going to tell a really bad joke so it glorifies this. Okay, so what has more lives than a cat?
What?
A frog. It croaks every night.
What?
All right, so this is probably my favorite Bible story in the entire Bible, and I take a weird point to this, but it works. So I call this consequences for sleeping. All right, it comes from Acts 20:7 through 12. On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Notice it's italicized. I'll get to that in a minute. Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, he kept on talking until midnight. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where we were meeting. Seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground from the third-story window and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him and said, "Don't be alarmed, he's alive." Then they went upstairs again, broke bread, and ate, and after talking until daylight, he left. The people took the young man home and were greatly comforted. And that broke bread is italicized too. Excellent. All right. These are some notes that Paul is preaching to followers and friends in Troas. He's on one of his great missions, and this is one of the stops. And so I italicized to break bread because this means, the first one means that this is part of the Lord's Supper. This is quite potentially the first Lord's Supper they did. And the second broke the bread means that they just ate food because somebody just died and came back to life, and that's what you do when that happens. So according to my Bible notes, this is also the first church to meet on a Sunday. So, all right, Luke, who is the guy that wrote the book of Acts, he's a physician, a Gentile physician, if that's of any importance. So when the guy fell out the window, Luke proclaimed the guy dead. It's like a doctor saying, he's dead. So, and we can see here that Paul performs a miracle, and when the people took Eutychus home, they literally saw a difference in the fact that he was walking. All right, so what can we take from this is my next question. And we can learn not to fall asleep while somebody's preaching to you, because you could fall out a window and die. It's bound to happen. It's happened before. So what we really can learn from this is not to be a sleeping Christian. Not to be a Christian that's when you're in your daily walk and you fall into a routine after you've been a Christian. You go to Wednesday, you show up on Sundays, and it starts becoming this deep burning passion, just starts becoming this whatever. So I have three stories that when this passage meant a lot to me was, I call it the gap. I went to a church in Cape, and we were all real big. We brought the church up from the ground, and needless to say, the things inside the church helped break it apart, so it all just fell apart. We all went our different ways, and I just opted not to go to church because I figured God was mad at me for something, and when somebody's mad at you, you would avoid him. So I was trying to avoid God. And so I was just whatevering it for like about a year and a half. And I had a good friend with me that when we all went to this church, she told me like every night to make sure I read my Bible, do a devotion. She kept me spiritually in my walk like I should have been. Well, as we all parted our different ways, over time she fell asleep. And she fell out the window and died around Valentine's Day, which is like 2 weeks.
No, wait, are you serious? Or what do you mean?
Oh, she like spiritually died. And so it was around Valentine's Day, and her best friend's brother got together one night, and 9 months later out popped little, I don't remember his name right now, but popped out. So I found out about this, and I was like, wow, that's deep, because that person was telling me to read my Bible, and that person was telling me to do all this back in the day, and it's just a huge shock. So then my turning point, my point of difference was I was talking to the old youth pastor of that church, and he had told me that you need to find a church, and you need to do it fast, and make sure it's a good church. So I was like, all right. So ironically, 3 days later, Chris Gonzalez asked me to come to the Gateway. And here I am. So my advice to you would be not to be a sleeping Christian. You don't want to fall into the path of sin of things like drugs, alcohol, sex, porn, fighting, cussing, dishonoring those put in authority, whether it's parents, teachers, police officers, or the law. Because, I mean, as ridiculous as some of the laws are, it is an offense if you fart in a public place on a Thursday after 6:30. It's a law, you gotta follow it. It is against the law to fart in a public place after 6:30 on a Thursday.
What state did you keep?
That's a law. You're perfectly fine up until 6:30. Then
What happens at 6:30?
I don't know. Alright, so, and then anger and music. What would God think of your iTunes?
This one.
Oh yeah, worshiping anything like money, clothes, shoes, TVs, PS3, Xbox 360, or cell phones. I was at one of my friend's house and her neighbor came over, and her neighbor was like, dude, asking her brother if he wanted to come over. He's like, dude, I've got this 50-inch TV, we should come play with it. And he was like, dude, you've had that for 4 months. He's like, yeah, so it's still the greatest thing ever. And so he was literally worshiping his TV. All right, and then anger and music. What would God think of your iTunes? If God was sitting right there, would you be willing to show him all of the music in your iTunes? Or would it be like, take this out, just look at this playlist. All right, so what can we do about this? We can either keep going strong and keep drinking our coffee and soaking up the Word and sitting in the window paying attention, or we could keep living the way that we are if you've fallen out of the window. Or we could we could all call on Jesus to come and throw his arms on us and take us upstairs to eat and drink some coffee so people will see a difference in us. And the choice is yours.